target word Dora. Regarding the stimuli of the British English vowels, I used the 11 English vowels, the tense and lax vowels. They were embedded in monosyllabic words in an HVD context, and they were part of the current phrase, they say, then the word now. The procedure, I presented these phrases in the standard orthography of the speakers L1s. They produce these current phrases, and they were recorded to a professional audio recorder. The phrases were randomized for each participant, and the Cypriot Greek speakers produced in total 220 items, and the English speakers actually they produced the same number of items. How I did the speech analysis, I did it in Pratt. Here I provide some information about the analysis. I measured the formants at their midpoint. The duration of the vowels emerged from the measurement of the interval between the starting and ending point of the vocalic part. I normalized the first two formants with the Lobanov method through the vowels package in R, and I transformed the normalized values in 3 Hz. Regarding the linear discriminant analysis, the classification of English vowels in terms of Cypriot Greek phonetic categories was investigated through an LDA in R using the mass package. I trained 2 models. The one model included only the first 2 formants, and the other model included the formant frequencies and the duration of vowels. So I had 2 models. Here you can see the results of the production study. In the green color, you can see the Cypriot Greek vowels, and in the purple color, you can see the English vowels. So as you can see, the Cypriot Greek E is close to the English E. The Cypriot Greek A is close to the English E. The Cypriot Greek A is close to several English vowels. And you can see that O is close to the English O, and U close to the English O. Here you can see the duration of the Cypriot Greek and English vowels. As you can see, the average duration of the Cypriot Greek vowels is between 120 and 150 milliseconds, while some English vowels are longer actually. They may reach 200 milliseconds. So there are differences. And here you can see the results of the classification study, which was based on the LDA. You can see the classification results in the 2 models. As you can see, for example, the English vowel E was classified in terms of the Greek E for 60%, but the English E was classified 100% in terms of the Cypriot Greek E. You can see that there are similarities between the 2 models, the formant and duration model and the formant model, but there are also some differences. For example, the English A vowel was classified 95% in the Cypriot Greek A, but in the F model, the same vowel was classified actually between A and O. So there are differences. Now, let's proceed with the methodology of the perceptual study. So in order to evaluate the predictions I showed before, we have to make the perceptual study. I used 20 Cypriot Greek speakers. Their age ranged from 21 to 42. They lived permanently in Cyprus. They started learning English at the age of 8 years. They used English for an average of 2 hours and 2.58 actually hours per day, and they had daily input in English 2.83 hours per day. They had good knowledge of English at the B2 C1 levels and good English understanding skills. They had healthy hearing and never encountered any language or cognitive problems. The stimuli, I used the 11 English monophthongs, HVD context, part again of the current phrase. The stimuli were recorded by 2 female adult English speakers, basic pronunciation speakers. And I normalize the output for peak intensity in Prague. The procedure, they did a classification test in Prague. They listened to the words that included the target English vowels and clicked on the script label that was acoustically the most similar exemplar to the vowel they heard. The labels included the orthographic representation of the 5 Cypriot Greek vowels. They classified 48 trials. The inter-trial interval was 500 milliseconds. They didn't receive any feedback, or there was no option for repetition of the acoustic stimuli. Here you can see the script. So they listened actually to a vowel, to the English vowel, and they had to match it with the orthographic label of the Cypriot Greek vowels. And here you can see the results of the perceptual study. Now we can compare these results with those presented by the LDA analysis. The FD model accurately predicted the classification of 7 vowels. You can see the vowels here as responses with the highest probability in terms of a single L1 category. And the F model again predicted with success 7 out of 11 English vowels. In terms of accurate predictions, that is those that predicted the whole range of responses more than chance, that is more than 20%. The FD model predicted 3 vowels, and the F model predicted 5 vowels. When I say more often than chance, I mean that we divide actually the number of responses with 100. So the chance score is 20%. So any category that had more than 20% classification meant that it goes above chance. So here we can see that, okay, both models predicted accurately 5 out of 11 vowels, which is quite good. It's a quite good result. And the discussion, the results of the perceptual tasks showed that more than one English vowel was classified above chance with the highest probability in terms of a single Cypriot Greek vowel category. And most L2 vowels were optimal responses of an L1 category. That is, they were the only above chance response to that category, while 3 vowels were classified as above chance responses in terms of 2 L1 vowel categories. So this shows that speakers realize most L2 vowels as being acoustically close to a single L1 vowel, especially those that are close to them in the vowel space. So we didn't have classification of second language vowels to several L1 categories. Most of them were categorized in one L1 category. This is favored by the small vowel inventory of Cypriot Greek, because there are only 5 vowels, which compels speakers to match the acoustically most approximate vowel with a particular L1 vowel from a narrow selection of L1 responses. So since the Cypriot Greek has a small vowel system, it means that they will accommodate most L2 vowels into the same L1 categories. In contrast, the classification of some English vowels in a range of L1 categories can be explained from the fact that they are located in the acoustic space between more than one vowel. For example, the English vowel A is between Cypriot Greek A and O, and this was the reason actually that it was classified as an above chance response in terms of both L1 categories. Both LDA models were successful in the prediction of 7 out of 11 English vowels. So we can say that acoustic similarity can be a good indicator of sound classification, but there were some vowels which could not be classified, which were not predicted accurately by the model. Similar results were found by other studies. So this can be explained due to the absence of important input features in LDA. For example, we didn't consider the third formant, or other dynamic formant trajectories, which comprise important aspects of vowel perception and production. So if we have added to the model other input features such as F3 or dynamic formant trajectories, maybe we could have actually more accurate results. In terms of accurate prediction, the FD model predicted 3 vowels and the F model predicted 5 vowels. So although both models are capable of predicting most of the speech's classification patterns, the better accuracy of the F model indicates that maybe duration cues might be less important than the formant cues for the perception of felt English vowels by Cypriot Greek speakers. So I'm going to finish with the conclusions. The classification of L2 sounds relies on the speaker's first language. Cross-linguistic acoustic similarity can be quite successful in predicting the classification of L2 sounds. Future studies can add more input parameters in the LDM model, such as the third formant. And a future study may compare the accuracy of acoustic versus perceptual similarity on the basis of a discrimination test in which listeners will discriminate L2 sound contrasts. Such a paradigm requires the theoretical predictions of a speech perception model. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgios. It was a very nice presentation on a topic that I really like, phonetics of L2. And we'll have comments and questions for last, okay? So keep here, please. And we have our next speaker in. Supposed to be, according to our program, Ekaterina. Is Ekaterina here? No, right? Do we have Lilia here? I saw Lilia coming. Hi, Lilia. Lydia, are you there? So we have a bit of a problem that I don't see Katarina here. And we don't have, Lilia is supposed to be after her. And we have also Yulia after Ekaterina, but I just see Lilia here and on the chat. Lilia, are you there? Yeah, I don't know what to do. Natalia is here, right, Natalia? Would you like to present first, maybe?
Yes, I can present, no problem.
Sure, Natalia, thank you so much.
Okay.
So Natalia is our last speaker of the program, but she'll present second now, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So let me just share the screen. I think it worked. Are you seeing my slides? Can you hear me well?
Yes, it's all good, Natalia.
Okay. So may I start?
Sure, go ahead. Thank you.
Let me just check. I'm gonna move the slide and see if it works.
It's fast.
Work?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited to be presenting here. And first things first, I'm Natalia Pinheiro de Angeli. I'm currently a PhD student at the Federal University of Santa Catarina and a member of LabLink, Laboratório da Linguagem e Processos Cognitivos. And the study I'll be presenting here today was conducted during my master's with the supervision of my advisor, Professor Maílce Borges Mota. And the title, or the question that I suggest to open my presentation here today is, what can cross-linguistic priming effects show us about bilingual language processing? An experimental study with Brazilian Portuguese, English bilinguals. So the first thing I want to present here is my working definition of bilingualism. As you can see here, I'll follow Gourjian's and Lee's operationalization of bilingualism or multilingualism as the use of two or more languages or dialects in everyday life. And more specifically, I will talk about bilingual syntactic processing and representation. That's the focus of the study. And this focus is justified because we know that, as you can see here in this quote, bilingual readers and listeners make use of grammatical knowledge to determine how words in sentences relate to one another. So that is true during L1 language processing and also during L2 language processing or bilingual language processing. But since a bilingual has two languages or more, if it's a multilingual, a lot of issues can be brought to our attention. So I brought here some of the questions that are often asked in this field of psycholinguistics of bilingualism. So first, do bilinguals have a shared or a separate syntactic system for each of their languages? So the syntactic representations, are they stored together regardless of language, or are they kept separate? Another question is, what happens when the same structure exists in both languages? So, for example, the passive voice exists in both Brazilian Portuguese and English. So would Brazilian Portuguese English bilinguals have only one representation for the passive, not specified for language, or two? And finally, how are the syntactic representations established? So what are the steps that a bilingual goes through when they are learning a second language and they are constructing this syntactic system? So our study tried to answer some of those questions. And in order to do so, our objective was to investigate the presence of structural priming effects from L1 to L2 during the comprehension of the passive voice by Brazilian Portuguese English late bilinguals. But first, what is a priming effect? So, priming is both a phenomenon of human memory and an experimental paradigm that is largely used in psycholinguistics. So, as you can see here, I brought a definition of priming. So, priming is the effect that the processing of a stimulus A has on the later processing of a stimulus B. So, when we're talking about language, and more specifically here about syntactic or structural priming, stimulus A and stimulus B would be syntactic structures within sentences. And we're going to call stimulus A the prime and stimulus B the target. So we'll say that a priming effect occurred when the processing of a prime sentence facilitated the later processing of a target sentence. And this facilitation can be, for instance, that participants were able to read the target structure faster. And the first study to use the priming paradigm as a tool for the investigation of bilingual language processing was conducted in 2012 1983 by Lebel and Bach. Bach was also the first to use synthetic priming in a study with L1 in 1986. But in this study, they found that listening and repeating a double object structure in English increased the production of the same double object structure in German. So what they found was syntactic priming effects between languages. So they interpret this result as evidence that the double object in English and German shared some level of syntactic representation. So this would assume a shared syntactic system or a shared node, at least for this particular structure. And in order to account for these results, this and others, two models were put forward, and I'm going to talk about them. So this is the first model, okay? So it's Hatzucker, Pickering, and Veldkamp's model. It is deemed the first lexicalist model of bilingual language processing. And what we are seeing here is a representational network composed of nodes. So we can see the lemma nodes, we can see the combinatorial nodes, we can see the category nodes. But most importantly, this network includes language nodes. In this case, this is the example Hatsuka and colleagues used. We have one node for English and another node for Spanish. So the important thing is that the same nodes can be connected to different languages. And this model assumes a shared syntax position. In other words, bilinguals would have only one big representational network in which all the knowledge of both languages would be stored. But this model talks about an end state. So another model was put forward in order to account for how bilinguals get there. So in 2018, Bernoulli and Hatzucker proposed a developmental model. So the most important thing here is that as L2 learners learn a new language, they develop representations that are first not shared between languages. So we can see above L1 and L2, and we can see that in the beginning, the representations are not shared. And not only that, they are also lexically bounded. So we're gonna have two of the same representational nodes here connected to different lemmas. And as learning occurs, this changes until they reach a fully shared and abstract network. That's going to be the last image here. So here we have a fully shared. So L1 and L2 are shared, and we don't have lexically bound nodes anymore. We have abstract nodes. So a lot of studies have reinforced this shared syntax position, but of course some questions remain unanswered. And in order to test some of the model's predictions regarding priming effects, our research questions and hypotheses are here. So I'm going to read them to you. Our first research question was, the reading time of late Brazilian Portuguese English bilinguals show cross-linguistic structural priming effects from Brazilian Portuguese to English during the comprehension of the passive voice? And the hypothesis being that it did. So the second research question, does L2 proficiency predict cross-linguistic structural priming effect? So the hypothesis being that the structural priming effects will be predicted by participant proficiency levels. And finally, our last research question, is there an interaction between structural priming effects, lexical repetition via translation equivalence, and L2 proficiency? And the hypothesis being that they will interact. So cross-linguistic structural priming effects will interact with lexical repetition and proficiency level. So here for our study. So in order to answer the research questions, we developed a 4x2 experimental design with a 4-level within subjects variable name condition and a 2-level between subjects variable name proficiency. So here is a table with the conditions. I brought some examples of the stimuli. So you can see here that I worked with 2 experimental conditions and 2 control conditions, right? So in the first experimental condition here, prime and target sentences share the same main verb and the same syntactic structure. So we have in Portuguese, o prédio foi construído pela engenheira-chefe, and in English, the castle was built by the queen. So we have syntactic repetition, the passive voice, and also lexical repetition via translation. The second experimental condition, we only have syntactic repetition. So here you can see, o prédio foi derrubado pela engenheira-chefe, and target being the same, the castle was built by the queen. So here only the syntactic structure is being repeated and not the main form. We don't have any transition there. So one experimental trial consisted of 2 prime sentences. So the whole task had 80 trials and approximately 400 sentences, but it was actually a lot more than that because the amount of fillers were not constant. So we have 2 to 4. And notice that I decided to include 2 prime sentences. And that was the case because previous studies in comprehension have struggled to find priming effects, specifically without the lexical repetition, the translation equivalent. So I thought that having 2 primes could lead to a deeper processing of the structure, since participants would always have 2 consecutive encounters with the structure. And after 3 trials, I added an attention question just to see if participants were actually reading. So the data collection was divided into 3 parts. First, participants answered some questionnaires. First, the consent form, the CLE, then a biographical questionnaire, and then a language experience questionnaire. After that, they did a proficiency exam in the dialogue, and they did the placement test and then the structure test. And finally, the most important was the 1-word moving window self-paced reading task, in which participants had to press the space bar to see the words, and the dependent variable was the reaction time. So here I brought a simulation of what participants saw, so you can pretend to be a participant. So they had to press the state. First, they had to look at this fixation cross, so they would know where to look, and then they would read the sentence 1 word at the time. So that was what participants saw. Initially, when I entered DMA, my data collection would be in the Labeling presential, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all data collection had to be carried out remotely. So I programmed the experiment using the JSI library, and it was hosted at the Labeling website. So for the participants, I had 35 late Brazilian Portuguese English bilinguals with ages ranging from 19 to 48 with a mean age of 30. 51% of the participants held at least a graduate degree, so that was something that we observed, and 82% of participants read English content on a daily basis. As for the proficiency, I had advanced users, 19, and intermediate users, 16. So to start with descriptive statistic, Here we can look at my region of interest, was the main verb, dropped. I also looked at the by preposition to see if there was a spillover effect, but it wasn't, so let's focus on the main verb. You can see that both of my experimental conditions that are in purple and in green and in blue showed priming effects. That is, participants took less to read the main verb of the target sentences. So for the inferential statistic, I constructed a mixed effect model to assess if reaction time significantly decreased as a function of prime type and or verb repetition. So I also included condition and proficiency as fixed factors, and participants and items were random factors. And since I also wanted to see if verb repetition would impact priming effects differently depending on proficiency, I also included an interaction term for condition and proficiency. So here's a summary of the model. But the main finding here was that structural priming effects were found in both experimental conditions, and proficiency did not interact with them. So just so you can visualize what happened, we have here an example of a prime and target sentences in experimental condition 2, where prime and target sentences did not share the same verb. And even so, participants were faster to read the English passive, the door was hit by the teenager, after having read the two primes in Brazilian Portuguese, in which we have the same syntactic structure, the passive voice, but we don't have the same verb. So finally, here's a visual demonstration of what we believe happened during the experiment. So we believe that while reading the prime sentence in Brazilian Portuguese, the participant activated the notes that are here in red, the Lima node as she, the category node verb, the syntactic node passive, and the language node for Brazilian Portuguese. And after that, what we believe happened, as proposed by Hatsuker and colleagues' model, some residual activation remained in the network. The residual activation is here represented in light red, so in the second image. And then finally, when participants read the target sentence, this residual activation made it easier or faster to activate the passive node again, thus creating the priming effects. As for our research questions and hypotheses, we only confirmed the first hypothesis, so reading times of late bilinguals demonstrated cross-linguistic structural priming effects during the comprehension of the passive voice. The second hypothesis regarding proficiency were not, and the third, both were not supported. So finally, what did cross-linguistic priming effects showed us about bilingual language processing was that Brazilian Portuguese English late bilinguals with intermediate and advanced levels of proficiency have already reached a developmental stage in which the passive voice node is fully shared between their two languages. So based on our results, we would say that intermediate and advanced L2 speakers of English whose L1 is Brazilian Portuguese share syntactic representation for the passive voice. So to finish my presentation, our study, more than some answers, also led us to more questions, as it is desirable. So here are some of them. So are two primes necessary for the occurrence of cross-linguistic syntactic priming effects during comprehension? Another question would be, would the results be the same from L2 to L1? Because we worked with prime and target sentences, prime in L1, right? And target in L2. So if we switch, would the results be the same? And finally, what would happen if proficiency were a within subject variable? So what would happen in a longitudinal study? So as of now, I don't have the answers for these questions, but I will soon, luckily, have them in the studies, with the studies that I will conduct now during my PhD. So that was it. I want to thank you all for the attention. Obrigada a todos pela atenção. Here's my email if anyone wants to get in touch. And if you follow this QR code, you will be led to the Labeling website, where you can check our publications. There are a lot of priming studies, both in L1 and L2, as well as other studies. So that was it. Thank you all.
Muito obrigada, Natália. Thank you very much to you and Mayusi as well. Labeling making a great appearance here at the Congress, right? Thank you so much for your support. Natalia was very gracious to agree to present second, right? But I would like to know if Ekaterina or Lilia are already here. Yulia is here, yeah? Yulia, maybe then you were supposed to be fourth, right? In our order here, but there's no problem if you agree to present now. But we just cannot listen to you. Your phone is off. Your microphone is off.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Do you hear me well?
Yes, quite well.
Oh, great. Great.
So you may present if you're ready.
I just try to show my presentation if it will be good.
Usually it works nicely if you put in the entire screen. It's the best option, okay?
Okay.
And then when you put it, you just...
Yeah, I try. So, do you see that?
No, not. Oh, it's starting. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, great.
Yes, we see it. We don't see it full screen, but now we see it.
I see like full screen. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, as you see, my topic for the discussion is association of verb predicate with personality characteristics in native and foreign languages. And the idea to investigate association of verb predicate with personality characteristics has emerged from several research lines. These are first and foremost semantic research. A lot of them I have just mentioned few names of Russian scholars and foreign scholars. In these researches, components of meaning are investigated, and the classification of verbs is drawn according to these differential components. For example, we come across such components as emotion, will, or volition in some works, force in probably force dynamic theories, initiative, intellect, conscience. Also social roles and statuses are studied as a part of verb meaning, mainly in terms of the theory of frame semantics and roles. And there are numerous research of such type. The second line is psycholexic studies, where verbs are viewed as carriers of personality descriptive meaning. In particular, Bolderad and William Hofstee use a set of verbs with differential capacity like love, help, or strive, in conjunction with a set of personality adjectives, and prove that the results from personality rating data according to the fifth factor model are related from both sets. These studies mainly focus, of of course, on psychology, I mean characterizing a person using the words. However, these diverse research lines, though different in approach and aims of study, prove that verb meaning stores certain knowledge about a person, and we could draw this knowledge, or this knowledge could be explicated as a result of cognitive operation that involves perception of form and semantics of verb predicate, correlation with a process schema kept in memory, profiling a figure of a prototypical doer or performer of the action, and concluding with features or characteristics of this doer or other participant of the action denoted. And these features should be viewed as either relevant or conditional, or as a consequence for the denoted action. And I will give you just a small example on words with the same root functioning as adjectives, noun, and verb. So if we have he is foolish, the characteristics is directly attributed to the subject he. He is a fool. A fool is a kind of a category of a person. And in the sentence, he fooled me, the verb fooled contains certain information about the characteristics of the person. But this information should be extracted logically, because first of all, we have this causal schema, he caused to be or made me, and then the feature that is attributed, be foolish. Then we could also draw a comparison between two participants of the denoted action, he versus me, in terms of intellectual ability, and the verb also implies that, while me is foolish, he is not foolish, probably he is cleverer than me. So you see, we come through a set of logical operations, and this implies certain cognitive effort. Moreover, most of such verbs contain certain social, cultural patterns of judging a person's character by type of action. So the question, like, for example, he welcomes them, we consider that a person who welcomes another person is typically hospitable. So we have here a stereotype or a typical representative of the category and his characteristic feature. Moreover, we here could draw the information about the social roles, like he would be probably the host, and them would be probably the guest in the situation described. So the question arises that such cognitive operation of extracting the knowledge about the personality from the verb meaning, whether this operation is the same or different in native language and in the foreign language. So are these differences in the association of verb predicate with personality characteristics in L2 and L1? So to find this out, we conducted a series of experiments with the respondents, our graduate students of English language faculty of Minsk State University. And the first part of the experiment contained just the stimuli phrases in their foreign language in L2, that is English, and the stimulus phrases were constructed in more or less abstract way. Person X, then we added verb, and person Y, and then the second would be person X is, and we add adjective or noun to describe the characteristics of the person. The respondents were to respond with either yes or no if the characteristics is correct or if it is wrong, and the time was restricted. The experiment was conducted on the platform psytoolkit.org. So here we tried to find out whether characteristics that are implied in the verb meaning are captured by L2 speakers. And of course, before that, we questioned language competence, although like we know our students, but still all our respondents marked that they have a proficient level of English. However, I should say that there was a number of answers that were removed from our survey because our respondents couldn't cope with this time limit. But this number was very small, mainly 10 cases. So the results were analyzed according to the major thesis that association activates implicative features, and the degree of application varies. And here we use the theory of Russian scholar Nikitin, who just differentiated implicational into like strong, weak, and negative implicational. Implicational means that the verb implies the feature on the contrary, so it implies the absence of the feature. And this is rather important when we look at texts that contain some stylistic effects like oxymoron, for example. So the results are the following. We have proved that verb predicate could activate the knowledge about the person's characteristics, but mainly the strong implication is revealed in the verb and characteristics pairs that are connected with rather already set social cultural codes of behavior that are common in native culture and in foreign culture, like think, polite, or like help, kind, and so on. So we have the similar concept of welcome, hospitable. Also, strong implication is observed in some negative characteristics with destructive verbs like attack, aggressive, or abuse, cruel, or terrorize, hostile. I should say that the results with teach and educate, that is strongly associated with the characteristics of knowledgeable, probably is the result of the environment of our experiment, because we have the respondents, future teachers, and the whole like their profession probably influences such type of association. We also revealed certain features that are not so strongly implicated, although if we look at the definitions of verb meaning in the dictionaries, or if we study collocations, we could find semantic connection between the characteristics we provided, and the verb predicate. However, we could say that from this chart that gender characteristics are not strongly implicated in the verb meaning, at least in foreign language, like only 54% of our respondents agreed that a person who rapes is male, or a person who harasses is male. We also have certain results that even if the verb belongs to the certain semantic group, like intellectual verbs that activates the characteristics of intellect, it doesn't prove that the characteristics of intellect are strongly connected, are strongly associated with the verb predicate, at least not in foreign language. And of course, there are certain verbs like praise and respectful, and here we see that the meaning of the verb praise is not directly similar to the Russian concept. and we have this difference reflected in our results. Only 64% of positive answers. Certain groups of verbs imply features on the contrary, like negative features. And again, we come across the verb teach, and 95% of our students refused to admit that a person that teaches is stupid, which is rather pleasant to know, by the way. Here we also have certain words that probably didn't show our hypothetic results. For example, warn. In certain contexts, we could see the verb warn that described the person who is aggressive. We even have this collocation, to warn aggressively. However, we have the majority of negative answers. That means that the meaning of verb warn is not associated with the characteristics aggressive, while the meaning of verb criticize, for example, is also not connected, not associated with the characteristics of kind, while we know that we have such action schema as constructive critique. Well, here we have proved that certain verbs do have strong association with personality characteristics, but the degree of this association varies, and probably the proficiency in a foreign language affect this degree of association. Thus, we conducted the second experiment, which was a directed association. The experiment was conducted in native Russian language and in foreign language, but these two series were in different times. Firstly, we have experiment in English, and only 2 months later we have a similar experiment in Russian. So the stimulus phrase was the question, what type of a person, and we included the verb. And actually, the same similar stimulus was for Russian. We analyzed results according to the frequency of reactions. We built associative fields with the nucleus at the periphery, and common and semantic groups as well. And also we analyzed the strategies that our respondents use in providing association. We included different verbs in this experiment. One group of verbs was similar in form and meaning in native and foreign language, like terrorize, and we have the same Russian terrorizировать. And the results proved that for such verbs, I give you only the example on this couple, we have similar frequent reactions, but the reaction that is second in range is a little bit different, because in English we have descriptive, like cruel and hostile, and in Russian we have abuser, which is a kind of a category, and you see that in Russian, this is the nucleus is more concentrated than in English. Our respondents use pretty similar strategies to provide associations. However, their percentage of these strategies is also different. In particular, we have the attribute description when respondents provide just adjective or another type of attribute. And the majority, the percentage is pretty similar. We have the prototype categorization when respondents provide the category of people that could perform this action. And we also have the strategy of derivation when our respondents provided the words of different parts of speech with the same root. In Russian language, we have more reactions that gave explanation in terms of parts of sentences or several word groups, not just one word. And of course, in English examples, we have the cases of language inference when on English stimulus, we have Russian reaction. The second group of verbs were different in form but similar in meaning. And the example is suffer, and we have similar страдать in Russian. And here we also see that the nuclear reactions are the same. However, their range is different. And again, the nucleus in the English associative field is more concentrated. If we look at the strategies, here we could say that such types of verbs have nearly the same strategies of association. I mean, attribute, description, prototype, categorization, derivation, explanation. However, we also have spotted cases of self-reflection in Russian when people reacted like me, I am, or my mother, my father, or my family. So this is kind of self-reflection. We didn't find similar reaction in English. And we have a more attribute description here for Russian than in English. And I should say that attributes were more emotionally colored than we have in English language. Well, in terms of prototype categorization, we should say that the situation is, in terms of types of reaction, is similar, but the percentage is different. In English, our respondents provided more categories, like victims or Ukrainians suffer. Well, you should understand that these reactions also are provoked by the current situation or by the experience of our respondents. And again, in Russian, we have more cases of wide explanation, more broad explanation than in the English. And the third group of verbs were different in form and have certain difference in semantics. Only one variant of their meaning is the same, like donate and жертвовать in Russian. In Russian, this verb contains the meaning of action when we, on the one hand, we suffer by giving something to others, and it's kind of more religious. And when we are made to give by force, like this. So here we have the difference in meaning. I should say that while in English the reactions were in the nucleus were more concentrated, we have 3 reactions in the nuclear. In Russian, we have more reactions and the percentage is not so high. So we have a very diverse periphery. And again, the nucleus is more concentrated here. And we have the difference in reaction. While in the first 2 groups, we have similarity in reactions, I mean, at least in the meaning. Here we have the difference because in Russian, it is victim, weak, loving, or mother, and in English it is generous or rich as the first range of reaction and kind as the second range. The strategies also show a difference in frequency. And however, here, because we have a broader field in Russian, we have more prototype categories, and these categories sometimes are connected with religion, like Jesus or hero, while in English it is more like social roles, like sponsor and ambassador. And drawing the conclusions, both our experiments proved our thesis that verb meaning contains certain characteristics of a personality, and these characteristics, as part of implicative meaning, are acquired while people study both native and foreign language, so it is connected with language acquisitions as well. However, these implications are also strongly connected with social cultural norms that exist in the society, in lingual culture. We also proved that the association could have different degree of stability, and we have also revealed certain differences in language 1, language 2 associations. In particular, the nucleus in the associative field for foreign stimulus is more concentrated, while the periphery of associative field in native language is more diverse. We also revealed that frequent reactions correlate if there is similarity in form and semantics of verb predicate. However, by the way, this result also correlates with researches that we have heard during the first day of this Congress. Our study shows that explanation as the associative strategy is more frequently applied in native language, because our Russian language has a more diverse system of flexions. I could say that we could have slight difference in derivational strategy. It slightly prevails in Russian than in English. However, on other languages, it may be not proved. And we also found evidence that associations are more personal in native language, and partly they are more emotional. So, of course, if I have time, yeah. My study is not finished. I'm planning to conduct similar studies for language learners of different cultures to find out whether social cultural norms affect this type of associations as well. So if you have any questions, I would be glad to hear, or any commentaries.
Thank you, Yulia. It was a bit longer than the others, but no problem, because we had some time. And now we're open for questions. Congratulations to all the talks, very interesting. Leonardo Cabral has a question. You can ask directly, Leonardo.
First of all, congratulations to everybody who has presented. All researchers are very interesting. My question goes to Natalia. It's more of a personal curiosity, because you clearly showed a priming syntactic priming effect that is cross-linguistic. And my question is, do you think there would be a difference if instead of a comprehension task, you had a production task? And I ask this because of my personal experience. I have close to no problem with reading but I've after 1 year that I haven't been teaching English, I've had a greater degree of difficulty with syntax. So that's my question.
Thank you for your question, Leonardo. Yeah, so when we were talking about priming studies, being in L1 or in L2, we have this distinction between priming in production and in comprehension, right? And usually in production, it's easier to find the priming effects. That's what the literature has been showing. So, for instance, in the study that I talked about by Libel and Bock, they were working with production, right? So, but yes, I would say that the results might be different. And I think maybe in relation to the lack of effect of proficiency that I found. Maybe comprehension, the priming effects during comprehension, they are too nuanced to catch in this difference of proficiency. Maybe in production, I would have found an effect of proficiency. That's what I would say. But I've been working with priming for some time, but I never worked with priming during production. I focus in priming during comprehension.
There was a question here, just to warn you, a typed question for you, and it relates to my to something else that I was thinking about. If you had for what I could gather, you studied speakers with intermediate and advanced proficiency, yes, not
Yes.
with low proficiency.
Yeah, that was actually a question by Robert, right?
Yes.
Robert, are you there? But he asked, so I understand you have some suspicions that proficiency ranges were not big enough, and you might need some less proficient ones. So
Yeah.
depending on the degree of proficiency.
Yeah, if I could just add something, because I read a study by Tanner. It's not about syntactic priming, but it investigated syntax and syntax processing, and they found that low proficiency speakers displayed an N400 component more associated with lexical semantics, and that more advanced learners, speakers, showed a P600,
Yeah.
which is more related to syntactic reanalysis. So maybe that's why you didn't find the related to the Robert's question.
Yeah, so thank you, Robert, for your question. Yeah, I think there are some possibilities there. One is that I didn't have the proficiency ranges were not big enough. So maybe if I would have included low proficient speakers, I would have found something. And another thing that maybe have happened is that I was working with a behavioral study, right? Maybe if I conducted a EEG study, for instance, as the one mentioned by Leonardo, I would have found something I wouldn't have found in the behavioral, but I would have in the EEG study, and that's what I am gonna do in my PhD.
Or an eye tracking study, Natalia. Eye tracking would also in reading,
eye
right?
tracking, yeah.
Would
So
go
different
back
measures.
to review some, then they would focus on syntactic orders that they wouldn't write in Portuguese, or yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's very sensitive in reading as well, right?
Yeah, and when we were working with people, there are, I think, if we try to narrow down the why that happened, we would be here for hours. One thing that caught my attention is that my participants, they were all as I mentioned, they had at least a graduate degree, so they were used to reading and reading in English, and we know that the passive voice in English is more frequent. So that's also something that I thought about. So I think there are a lot of that's why I ended the presentation talking about the questions that remained and that I want to pursue. But yes, I would love to include low proficient speakers also, so that would be a possibility.
Thank you, Natalia. I have a question for Georges. Georges,
Yes.
you're there, right?
Here, yeah, yeah.
Well, concerning the Labovian normalization, how many participants you had that could you divide them fairly by gender?
Yeah.
You had 10 for each group?
I had in that one, yes, I had 10 participants. Actually, I had 10, wait a second, 10 English participants and 11 Cypriot Greek participants, so 21.
And then how many of them were men and how many of them were women? Do you remember?
All of them were females, so yeah, I chose only female speakers to reduce the effect of gender.
Yeah, it's just the issue with the number of participants, right, in the Lobanovian normalization then for your F1 and F2, right? But okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's better to have more participants, but I think, okay, this is just a small scale study, but it's always...
It's a pilot or a primary study?
It's not a pilot study, but I will build on that study, actually, because I want to check some hypothesis of a new speech model. But sometimes, you know, I see studies with 10, 15, or 20 participants in good journals. So,
yeah, okay, right, yeah. And no, it's just the Lobanovian normalization that caught my attention in this sense. But it's something for you to think about. And is there any questions for Julia?
I have one, but first of all, it's actually very interesting that we had a talk, as she mentioned, on Monday, which confirmed her own results, and her own results showed the same effect. That's super cool. And but my question is whether it makes sense to say that perhaps the bigger concentration of I don't know if I can say word association. I'm sorry, the proper terms for your research for a non-native language may be linked to a lesser knowledge of lexical items, and not exactly due to the native language being involving more emotional associations. And did you control proficiency, for example? I don't remember in your study.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have question proficiency at the beginning. These are our graduate students and they are future teachers. So, however, we still question proficiency, and we also we selected only those who answered that they are proficient in English. This is, of course, self-assessment, but time restriction also somehow selected our respondents to a certain extent, because if they couldn't understand the meaning of words, or they are not not so proficient in conducting this rather complicated cognitive operation, they wouldn't fit in time. Well, I have a very small study, pilot study on groups of language learners, I mean children at school. I'm not sure whether this language proficiency could be applied to them, but it was like B1 or B2. But again, yeah, this short study proved your idea that the result of this extraction depends on their knowledge of foreign words, the knowledge of meaning. But I should say that also on their experience, because we read the texts and analyze text, and of course it should have some effect on our language competence as well. However, again, if they can't understand the meaning of verb or the meaning of action, they can't draw a decision. And in Russian, it's the same, by the way. The native speakers are children in Russian. It is also rather difficult for them to answer the question, what type of a person does this, in a very limited time, very quickly. And the range of answer is different, but this is another angle of research. So it's another domain of research. Yeah, but again, yes, I agree that language proficiency, the knowledge of the semantics affects the association.
Robert, would you like to make your comment to Yulia?
Thank you for your answer. And congratulations once again.
Thank you, Leonardo. Thank you, Yulia. Robert has also a comment. Would you like to do it directly?
Yeah, but that was really just a footnote.
Okay, just Robert comment that his impression from some of his data, I think we could argue for that in terms of acquisition of features of representations. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I should say that I agree.
I'm very curious, by the way, Yulia, on how it happens. Are you usually bilinguals, Russian and Belarusian? Or
actually, you mean in our country?
yes.
The thing is that we have two state languages, Russian and Belarusian, but I should say that there are not a great proportion of people who speak Belarusian as their native language. So for all our respondents, Russian is the native language, and my native language is Russian. And I also have such problem now because I investigated also Belarusian in these terms. I want to find this social differences and uniqueness of verb semantics in Belarusian compared to English. But I have the problem now to find native speakers of Belarusian in my country. So you see,
so interesting. Okay, so, but who speak Belarusian as a first language then?
I should travel to some other regions, or I should go. There are certain special groups of of students at university, special groups.
Right.
You see, but again, it is also connected with what type of Belarusian they speak. And I want to find also like Belarusian native language and English as a foreign language, and it's still more difficult. So I'm not sure whether we could say, well, but of course we have bilinguals as well.
It's very interesting that Russian is the most common first language, right? That you
well, at least in Minsk, or in Brest. This is my the region where I come from, and Minsk, our capital. But in other regions, or the situation is slightly different. But I should travel there. Yeah.
Okay. For you.
Yeah.
Nice, guys. I think they were all really interesting talks and really culturally different ones as well. So that's amazing that we have this mix of countries and different researchers as well today. Thank you so much for each one of you, every and each one of you. And I think for this morning, that's it. And then we'll continue with Holger Mitter's workshop, right, at 2 p.m.
Thank you, Amanda. E parabéns pela organização do evento.
Thank you so much.
Obrigada. É uma pessoa assim e os monitores, mas tá caminhando bem.
No, it's very, very good.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.